Most people think mental health is something that you deal with privately. But what happens when it starts affecting your decisions, your relationships, your safety, or even your future? Because in some cases, it isn't just the personal things, it becomes legal. Now, today we're going to be talking about something that doesn't get discussed enough. The intersection between mental health, addiction, and real life consequences, because more people than ever are struggling with anxiety, burnout, substance use, emotional overwhelm. But very few understand what happens when you go through struggles that are starting to impact your decisions in serious ways. Now, today I'm joined by Mark Astor from the mental health addiction law firm who works directly with individuals and families navigating these complex situations. Today, we're going to be breaking down this in a way that helps you understand what to look for and what to do before things escalate. Mark, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on. You've been on, many times before, and you're always a pleasure, and you bring such a wealth of information. I just want to, thank you for coming today and spend time with us to help educate our listeners.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Stacey. I enjoyed your company the last time I was here, and well, I think that you're doing important work, and you, on a personal level, you're just a joy to be with, spend time with. So, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well. Now, I want to just, start here. So, are you seeing more cases today where mental health or addiction is leading to serious life consequences?
Yeah, I mean, so we just celebrated our 10th anniversary in February, but in February of 16, when I sat down in the local library to open up my law firm because I had no money to go rent an office, so I started, somewhere I could sit for free. The bulk of the cases that I was actively looking for were alcohol and recreational drug use. Since then, two things came along that really changed the focus of the kinds of cases. One was the legalization of marijuana, and two was the COVID shutdown. Even here in Florida, we were a little bit restricted.
Yeah.
What we saw after those two things, was a shift from these primary substance use and recreational drug cases to primary mental illness. And so which makes the cases considerably more challenging. I think the days where you can just put somebody in treatment for 3 to 6 months, they go to meetings afterwards, I wouldn't say they're gone, but those are not what we get. Right. We get I always sort of joke that the easy cases go to my competition, and the very difficult, challenging cases come to us. So, when you've got somebody who's, for instance, experiencing psychosis because they were using a substance that caused that, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to get into that in a little bit. Those are challenging cases, right? Because once somebody is in psychosis where they're, hallucinating, they're delusional, they're, for all intents and purposes, living in a different universe to the rest of us,
Yeah.
it can take time. So it's not just a matter of staying in treatment long enough. They also need to be medicated. Now, sometimes they don't want to take the medications, or they'll start taking them and then they say, well, I'm fine now. I don't need to take them anymore. And
Right.
so it's one thing to get somebody ordered into treatment. It's something completely different to get a judge to give you the authority to basically have somebody taken to a hospital and forcibly medicated. So, I mean, we're talking about asking the court for extraordinary relief here, because
Yeah.
as a general rule, we have a right to say, well, I don't want to take that medication. When
Right.
I had my arm surgery recently, the doctor wanted to give me oxys. I said, I'm not taking them. I have a right to refuse. What was I going to do? Have the state come and take me away? Sometimes when you're dealing with somebody who's actively psychotic, that's when the state can step in and effectively terminates everybody's rights to make medical and mental health decisions for the patient.
Yeah.
And now they're going to be forcibly medicated whether they like it or not. So the cases have become challenging both clinically and legally. And, the recovery journey is longer than it perhaps otherwise would be.
Right. Now, what changed them to make this, this way?
Well, I think the big thing is the legalized marijuana. And so there's 40 states that in one way, form or another, you can legally buy marijuana. And I think the problem is what we're really dealing with now. I'm a child of the '80s, grew up in the United Kingdom, and I had a number of friends that used marijuana. And truthfully, when they talked about legalizing it here in Florida, I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, because I was sort of saying, okay, I know what this looks like. It's fine, right? Well, it turns out I was wrong, because the marijuana of today is not the marijuana of the '80s. It's significantly more potent
Yes.
and more dangerous. And as a result, it can lead to things like psychosis. So where there may not have been a mental health issue, now we have a mental health issue. And if there's any predisposition for mental illness in the family, and there's a strong genetic link to some of the things that we see, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. And once
Yeah.
someone's in psychosis, it takes time to get them out. and it only takes one relapse to get them back in. Essentially, it's a bit like a concussion. The first time you get a concussion, you recover. The second concussion doesn't take nearly the force or impact that the first one did.
Right.
Right. Once the brain is slightly damaged, and I spent 20 years training in the martial arts, and I've had my bell rung once or twice. Once you've
Yeah.
had a concussion, it's that much easier to get a concussion.
Oh,
Once
yeah.
you've experienced psychosis, it's that much easier to experience psychosis.
Right.
And that makes them challenging.
It does. It really does. Now, why is this becoming more common?
I think because, well, I think there's a couple things. One is that, these recreational drugs are far more accessible, right? I can just walk into a store and buy it.
Right.
And two, I think there is sort of this idea that it's legal means safe, right?
Right.
We speak to parents, well, it's legal, so it must be safe. No, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe. I mean, there's other substances also that are available in gas stations and things of that nature that are, quote, legal, but they're not safe.
Yeah.
And I think that frankly, that includes prescription medications. Just because it's legal don't mean it's safe. And I think that's part of the problem, right? Well, he got it legally, he had a card from the doctor, so it must be safe. The doctor would never have given him the card.
Right. Exactly. And you know that there's so many different strands. In one marijuana leaf, there's over 1,000 different strands. And each one is for something different that activates different parts of the brain. People have to really understand what they're taking and how it could affect them also. And then for a lot of people too, a lot of people don't even realize that if you're taking medication also, you could actually reduce the potency of certain medications, and you could have a lot of serious problems, if you're taking medical marijuana along with even legalized marijuana along with other medications. And it's really important, for people to consult their doctors and go over their medical history before they just jump into it. And one other thing is where are you getting it from? How reliable is the resource where you're obtaining the medical marijuana or the marijuana. That's plays a big role. I know that in my area, in New York area, they shut down a bunch of places because what they were doing wasn't safe for individuals. And a lot of some of the products that they were purchasing and selling to their customers weren't safe and they weren't getting them in safe places. So you really have to be careful and know your stuff before you just jump into it.
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point, Stacey. I mean, some of these new products that are available in gas stations, there have been instances where where somebody's used them. And again, thought because it's just being sold in a gas station, how dangerous could it be? And yet when it's combined with a prescription medication, it had a deadly effect.
Hmm.
So, you know, I think your point is really well taken. And, as far as the marijuana is concerned, when you buy alcohol, right, it says on the can, right, the percentage of alcohol, right? And there are regulations that restrict that, right?
Hmm.
In terms of how much alcohol can a particular drink contain. Well, there's no such regulation as far as I'm aware when it comes to marijuana. And obviously if you go to say Walmart and buy a beer, and then you go down the street and you go to another convenience store and you buy the beer, if it's the same product, it's going to contain the same level of alcohol. It's not happening with marijuana because there's no oversight. You might buy marijuana from one dispensary and then buy it from another, and they both have different levels of potency, and you don't really know what you're getting, even if they say, well, this is the percentage of THC that's actually in it, which is that's the substance that gets you the high, right?
Yes.
They say, well, they might say, well, it's X percent of THC in there, but how do you really know that? Because no one's checking.
Yeah.
So there's no oversight. Of course, there's the ability to cheat, right? Because there's money to be made.
Right.
So we sell the best stuff because you get the best high, right?
Hmm.
And meanwhile, people are catatonic.
Yes. 100%. Now, a lot of people don't realize when things are escalating, what are some of the early warning signs that mental health or addiction is starting to impact someone's judgment or their behavior?
Yeah, I always tell families I tell especially parents to be nosy parents.
Hmm.
So a lot of the time when we speak to a family, and it's usually mom that calls us first, Stacy,
Yeah.
and we'll say, well, how do you know there's a problem? And the number one answer is, I just know. Subconsciously, mom knows, but what mom may not consciously be aware of is the change of things that are happening, right? For
Right.
instance, right, they've become aloof. They no longer want to spend time with the family. They're hanging out with different friends than they used to have.
Right.
They are sleeping most of the day. They're up all night. They can't hold down a job. They're flunking out of school. Maybe they've even been arrested. Their eating habits have changed. They went from eating, regular food to, eating all kinds of junk food and sugar.
Yeah.
Perhaps they seem unable to focus on anything. Their bathing habits have changed. They're not brushing their teeth. They're not showering regularly. They're just, these things sort of there's a myriad of red flags, but there's clearly something going on. And maybe they've even admitted it. Sometimes, I'll ask parents, well, how do you know they're smoking?
Right.
Or he tells me, I see him do it in the back garden. I've told him he can smoke, but not in the house. Right. And you take all of those things to mind. You're like, okay, something's not right here because
Yeah.
he or she never used to be like this. And when
Mhm.
I ask them what's going on here, their response is, "Was nothing wrong with me. I'm perfectly okay.
Right.
What's the problem here?"
Mhm.
They're in denial. They're
Right.
in denial. And so the idea of having a conversation about getting this person some treatment is, I mean, that's just a different world. Why would they go to treatment? There's nothing wrong with them.
Exactly. Now, what do families often miss?
Oh, that's a really good question. What do they miss? I think they miss the early warning signs. Okay. And sometimes the early warning signs could be, they know that they're using, but they're like, well, it's just a little marijuana. What's the big deal?
Right.
That is if they never used before, why are they using all of a sudden?
Right.
So I think that is something that was missed. Or, to get back to the idea of having, it being legal. Well, he's suffering from anxiety. Why? So he went to his doctor. The doctor gave him the prescription, and he went and filled it at the local dispensary. Well, what is he anxious about?
Right.
Or is it just an excuse to get high?
Yeah.
Maybe. So there's something little things. And sometimes, and I say this from a place of love, sometimes the families are in denial about what they've really been observing. And
Yes.
they know deep down there's a problem, but being willing to admit it is an uncomfortable feeling because normally I know there's a problem is and can be followed by the blame game. Well, it's the dad's fault. It's the mom's fault. Well, it's granddad's fault because he was an alcoholic.
Right.
And so what happens is, you go down the path of blaming somebody or finding a reason why this is happening.
Yeah.
And, look, if somebody had cancer, would you do that? Would you say, well, Mark's got cancer because, well, his grandfather had the same kind of cancer. So it's the grandfather's. We would never do that.
Right.
We would never do that. But yet we do that when it comes to, behavioral health issues because there's a little bit of stigma attached to it. And the stigma has to do with the fact that it's a conscious choice and not a disease, which is at this point been, completely proven to be wrong. It's not a conscious choice. Now, maybe somebody started to use consciously. They said, oh, I'm just going to have a few drinks or I'm just going to have a puff. But then once they had that first drink, that first puff, things started to, escalate rather rapidly. And
Mhm.
it's very easy to say, well, the reason he can't hold his liquor is because his grandfather was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I don't think that helps anything. It just makes it worse. And at least when you call our office, I mean, I always tell the staff, we live in a no judgment zone. It's not
Mhm.
about whose fault it was. First of all, it's no one's fault because it's a disease.
Right.
And
Exactly.
second of all, we're not going to have a debate between the parents or the parents and the grandparents about whose fault it might be because of some genetic connection they may or may not be. That doesn't solve the problem and it's unfruitful and it just creates tension in the family. And the goal here is to save the family, not destroy it. We're trying to build a bridge, not burn it down.
Exactly. I see that all the time. I see denial from the individual themselves. I see denial from the family members. No one wants to take responsibility for anything. And if the parents are in denial, it's because they feel a sense, well, if this is my fault. Maybe I didn't do a good job, but this was a choice, and this was to me it was a I see a lot of times it's a coping mechanism. When people are going through tough times and they don't know how to cope with a lot of issues. Some people go to food, some people go to alcohol, some people go to drugs, or they start in alcohol and then they kind of work their way up the ladder. And then I've known people that have done drugs and they just did it at a party and they got addicted to it. In our area, I was very surprised, but I had to do a write up in a newspaper and I had to go to a seminar that the police were teaching, and heroin addiction was one of the top things in our area. And I was surprised that heroin was such a huge issue. And a lot of kids were getting their hands on heroin and then just one usage and they were getting completely addicted to it. And then several people died from one usage of the heroin because it was laced with fentanyl or something else. And so it definitely is a huge problem in our society. And it's, and instead of pointing fingers and trying to, see who is blame. Let's solve the problem. And so, we can improve that person's life.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get rid of, these behavioral health issues. Don't. I was talking to somebody on a podcast, and they said, "Well, what do you?" The issue that we were discussing was could we ban marijuana? Well, first of all, we've been down that street with alcohol,
Hmm.
and yeah, I mean, we banned it, and what happened? It just went into the underworld.
Yeah.
We've already had our marijuana banned, and it didn't do anything, right? It was still readily available, but we didn't
Hmm.
have the mental health crisis that we have now. So I think we've made it readily available. So I think there has to be stricter regulation on who can get it and who can't get it, the level,
Hmm.
the potency. We regulate the potency of alcoholic beverages. Why can't we do the same with marijuana,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Great point. Yeah.
So I think there has to be some regulation. But the problem is that many states have legalized it, Stacey, because there's too much money to be made.
Hmm.
The state of Colorado legalized marijuana. And I don't know if you've been to Denver recently, but my wife and I were there for about a year and a half ago for a conference, and everywhere we went, we could smell weed. We were in New York about 2 months ago, and everywhere we went, we could smell weed. It was everywhere.
Everywhere.
So everywhere we went, we could smell it. It was truly unbelievable. Colorado now is now having a mental health crisis. Why? Because a lot of these people who are using this new legalized marijuana are experiencing mental health issues, and the state's running a budget deficit. They don't have the money to provide services for all these people. So
Right.
what do we do?
Exactly.
I think the greed, right? Because these states legalized it knowing that it was illegal under federal law, although that looks like it's going to change.
Yeah.
They knew it was illegal under federal law, and they did it anyway
Right.
because, well, there's money to be made. Yeah, but there's money to be made, but there's consequences for doing that. And
Right.
ultimately, these states are going to pay a whole lot more out or be required to pay more out, and they're going to get in because they're
Right.
going to have a whole group of people that have mental health issues now they didn't have before, and someone's got to pay for the treatment. Not
Right.
everybody has the money to pay for treatment, and not everybody has health insurance that will cover treatment. So the
Exactly.
state's going to have to pony up, or
Right.
not, as the case may be, and just leave these people to fend for themselves.
Right.
So we'll start filling up our jails with people who have mental health issues because ultimately they're going to do something stupid and get arrested, or they'll end up dead.
Yeah, it's so true. Now, if you're listening and you or someone you care about is dealing with this problem like stress, burnout, or emotional challenges, mental health issues, addiction, make sure you follow this podcast because we focus on real conversations and real solutions that can help you take control before things spiral out. Now, at what point does something move from this is a personal struggle to this could, have serious consequences?
Yeah, man. I think Stacey, when it affects your ability to function, every day. I mean, if you're not able to get up for work, if you're driving high, if you're not able, maybe you can't hold down a job or you're flunking out of school, when it
Yeah,
starts to affect your everyday functionability, then I think there's a problem. And I think there's a fine line between individual freedoms and regulating some of these things. It was interesting. Some of the comments I get when I post videos about this are people complaining, well, I'm trying to take away their kratom, or I'm trying to away the marijuana, or I'm taking away their booze. I'm not. Listen, if you want to sit in your house all day long and get stoned, knock yourself out. I'm not here to tell you how to live your life.
right.
But if what you're doing is affecting not just you, but your entire family, because there's a reason they call it a family disease, then there's a problem. Then there's a problem.
Yeah,
So that's where the line gets crossed, right? When it starts to affect the family. And if you have people
exactly.
that rely on you and you can't put food on the table because you're high all day, or you're drunk all day, or you're
Right.
in psychosis and you're just your brain has been kidnapped,
Yeah,
then yeah, there's a problem here. There's a problem here. So somebody needs to step in and help you
exactly.
because I mean that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to help people. That's how
Right,
it works, right? That's part of the role of government is to help and protect citizens.
right, percent. Now, what are the risks that people really don't think about?
I mean, obviously, if you, I mean, I think back to my days when I was prosecutor. Essentially, I think about the Tiger Woods case. The lawyer's actually representing him was a former mentor of mine. But I've also read the probable cause affidavit. I've looked at the DUI video, the rest. I used to file these cases as a prosecutor. I wouldn't file this case. They're going to file it because it's Martin County and he's Tiger Woods. But,
Yeah,
there allegedly a connection between the pain pills he had in his pocket and his accident. Let's say for the sake of argument that there is, right? I think that's the kind of thing that can happen if you have a substance use disorder, right? And Tiger may well have a substance use disorder, but him having a substance use disorder and being guilty of committing a crime are two very different things. right? I
Right.
don't think there's nearly enough evidence to convict him, but maybe there's 6 people out there sitting on a jury who would feel differently. But the
Right.
point is that that's one of the consequences. I mean, he's lucky he wasn't hurt, but he could have killed himself or killed somebody else, right? But now he can't play golf. He can't. He's in treatment. I mean, there's just such a myriad of things that happen because what happens is it starts to consume you.
Yes, it really
And
does.
and not only does it consume you, but it consumes everybody in the family. It's like a metastasizing cancer. It's affecting everybody
Yes,
because the family is suffering while you are suffering, even if you don't know that you are, even if you
exactly.
don't believe that you are.
That's true. Now, what are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're dealing with these situations? Like, do they wait too long?
Yeah, I know. I think there's a couple of things, Stacey. I think we speak to the families. I think there's a couple of things, and I'm just sort of mulling this over. But I think sometimes the families say, "Oh, it'll be fine, right?
Hmm.
He'll grow out of it. She'll grow out of it." Or if we just leave it alone, it'll disappear on its own.
Right.
Okay. Or treatment doesn't work. Or that legal thing that Astor talks about when he puts out his videos, that doesn't work either.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, it all circles around the idea that, nothing can change. Well, nothing can change if nothing changes, right? I mean, it's the true definition of insanity. If you continue to do the same things and just watch, then yeah, it's going to continue like any disease. It will get worse and it will destroy the host eventually.
Right.
So I think that, action beats reaction, right?
Yeah.
Better to try and do something now than somebody ends up in a state mental health facility, or they end up in jail, or they had
Yeah.
an overdose. And now we're like in full on reaction mode trying to
Yeah.
unring the bell,
Right.
which can be very difficult to do.
100%. Do you think that people maybe just don't know where to turn? I've come across so many people that come to me and they talk to me about addiction and they talk to me about lots of different topics and they just don't know where to go. There's, even though there's so many options out there for especially for the topics that we are talking about mental health and talking about addiction, a lot of people when you ask them, so what are you doing about it? And they're like, I don't know. I don't know where to go. Or they go somewhere and the help they're getting is not gonna give them the help they need.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons people call us is that they don't know what to turn to, and maybe they've tried something, maybe they haven't, and so I think people are like, wow, you're a lawyer, how can you help me?
Yeah,
Well, part of what we do is to give you control of what is typically an out of control situation. I mean,
right.
there's two really good reasons to come to Florida. People say, well, I'm in New York. We've represented families from New York, dozens of times. I've also, we get calls from California and Hawaii and Oregon. So
Yeah,
people are calling us really there's two reasons why they're reaching out to us. There's two reasons to come to Florida. Number one, we have great treatment here in Florida, and we've done a very good job, thanks to our former state attorney, Dave Ehrenberg, of cleaning up the industry. So we have great treatment here. But two, the other thing that we have is that we have laws on the books
yeah,
that allow you to put somebody into treatment, to make the decision for them that they can't make. So if they can't make the decision to save themselves, how do we save them? Well, if you're waiting for the state to step in through either the criminal justice system or the mental health system, good luck with that. If they do step in, you won't like what you see if you ever get them back.
yeah,
So Florida's a great place to come because it's about empowering families. Now you can make the decision. You can make the commitment because your loved one simply can't do it because their brain's been hijacked.
yes,
And so where we come in is empowering families. And a lot of families, when they reach out to us, say, wow, I didn't realize we could do this. Who would have thought? Come to Florida and get well, right? You-
right.
that phrase isn't a new one. It's just that back 10 years ago, before we had a task force to clean up the industry, it had a very different connotation, which was, I'll send you a plane ticket. You come down here. I bang your insurance for as much as I can, and then
Yeah,
I let you leave, right? Just the other day, I spoke to a family and they were telling me how a treatment center down here sent their loved one a plane ticket to come down. Do you know how unbelievably illegal that is? You cannot do that. You
yeah,
can't even so much as give them a toothbrush. So, there are still some, for lack of a better word, shysters down here. And it really bugs the heck out of me that people
yeah,
have just no moral compass when it comes to these issues. And,
right,
and I get it. We all have to put food on the table, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. I have to answer the Florida bar if I do it wrong, and they take my license away.
right.
It seems the treatment centers don't get held to the same type of standards, but families don't realize there are options out here. Even when you've tried everything and nothing seems to work, coming to Florida is a really good decision. How do we get them here? Well, that's maybe a topic for a whole other podcast, but we
Yeah,
can get them here. And there's a number of ways to do that. And I work with some phenomenal clinicians that can help you with that. Or we could, go the legal route in a different state, which is, again, something we can help with. And we do it a lot where we work with a lawyer from another state. But coming here is a good place to get treatment and a good place to get well if you do it right.
exactly. Let's make this practical. If somebody is listening right now and they're concerned about themselves or a loved one, what's the first step that they should take?
Well, our clients, Stacey, are typically the parents. I would tell them to go to our website, mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com, and start, seeing the kinds of things that we can help with. I would also encourage them to go to our YouTube channel. So if you just Google my name, I'll probably come up on the very first page. There's about 1,000 videos where I talk about these kinds of issues. There
Yeah,
is literally 1,000 videos there. You can listen to them till your heart's content. I try to give away as much information as I can for free. You know, mm, I think that's been an important part of what we do.
now when it comes to going to your website, where can they find your website?
So yeah, it's just mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's our main website, and you'll find a lot of information on there. And I also just wrote a book that's coming out any day now about the Marchman Act. So the Marchman Act is a statute that's unique to Florida, and it allows us to put people with a primary substance use disorder into treatment for chunks of 90 days. It also allows us to get a court order to pick them up on an emergency basis without even a hearing, and basically have law enforcement come and get them and take them to a place of safety where they can be held for 72 hours. And I've got a downloadable book. We're just waiting to get it online. It'll not only have a bunch of information, but it's going to have, I've recorded, I think, 3 videos for each of the 9 chapters. So you'll be able to
Nice.
listen to me till your heart's content.
Love that. I love
Yeah.
that. So when is this supposed to be launched? You said next week?
I'm hoping in the next week or two, and it'll be on the main site. So
Okay.
stay tuned. I put a lot of time, energy, and money into that thing. Hopefully.
Would this be also available on Amazon?
You know what? I think we're going to make a hard copy. I was just talking to my marketing guy yesterday. I believe we'll have a hard copy ready to go
I love
so people
that.
can download it. There's a basic book on Amazon right now, but it's not nothing to, it's not nearly the quality that was written 8, 9 years ago. This is a really, there's a lot of content and a lot of meat on the bone for families
Yeah.
wanting to learn about Florida's Marchman Act.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Now, one important question I want to ask you, a lot of people don't realize this, but this doesn't just affect one person. This affects the entire family. And a lot of times people don't realize that. But, you know, how does this actually impact the families?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a metastasizing cancer, Stacey. I mean, think about it. The parents call us and they've got a child. Essentially, my mom is 83, I'm 59. And I'm telling you, to my mother, I'm still the same little boy I was,
Yeah.
55 years ago when I was running around destroying the house. So I think for parents, when they see an adult child like this is still their little boy or their little girl. And that connection, and I watch it with my own wife. I'm a stepdad, but I watch my wife's connection with the children. And
Yeah.
there is just something very special, especially when it comes to the mums, the
Hmm.
connection between mother and child. And
Yeah.
the suffering that their loved one is experiencing is very internalized. And it really can wreck families. It's why the siblings move out. It's why the parents are fighting or even talking about getting divorced because they can't get on the same page about what to do with their adult child who
Right.
says they're fine when we all know they're not.
Exactly. Now, what should families be doing differently?
I tell especially parents, be nosy.
Yeah.
Find out what's going on in your child's life. Sit and have conversations with them. Don't, rely on Chat GPT to be the parent. And I say
Hmm.
that tongue in cheek because we've seen a couple of instances where Chat GPT has been used as sort of a mental health counselor, or a parent, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I tell families, be nosy. Find
Right.
out who your loved ones spending time with. Get to know those people. If
Yeah.
they're working, where are they working? What are they doing? If they're in school, what are they studying? Who are they spending time with, either in class or out of class?
Right.
Be nosy. Sit and have a conversation with your loved ones, about their life.
Oh,
Are
yeah.
they happy? Are they unhappy? Who is their significant other if they have one?
Right.
Just be nosy, care enough to ask them the questions. And if they're aloof, okay, then maybe there's a red flag there. There's something's going on and you need
Right.
to push a little harder.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, if there is one thing you want people to understand about mental health and addiction, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is that this is not a conscious choice. This is a disease. And if you treat it as a disease, one, I think it'll help you to rationalize what's really going on here. Number two, I think that if you can say, and you can accept the fact that it's a disease, now you say, okay, if it's a disease, what's the cure? What's the treatment? Okay, that's where we come in. Well, the treatment is this, the treatment is that. Maybe it's a combination of things. But once you can accept the fact that it's a disease and that it can be treated and that the person can go into recovery, as opposed to, say, if it was cancer, go into remission,
Right.
now we can start to have a positive conversation about ending the chaos, ending the nightmare, ending the suffering. But
Exactly.
until that happens and you can accept it, and not every family's able to do that, say, well, it's a conscious decision. Okay,
Mhm.
well, I can't, with all the legal tools I have, I can't, you know, I can't get them to change their mind.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not ready to accept the fact that, that this is a disease and it can be treated, then I don't know if I can help you. I
Right.
cannot sit down with your loved one and convince them that there's something wrong when they believe there's nothing wrong.
Right. I feel like a lot of times they have to hit rock bottom before they actually can get to that point
Are
of
we talking
healing.
about the parents or the patient?
Well, now I'm talking about the patient. Like we were just talking about the parents right now, but a lot of parents are in denial. So when you talk about parents being in denial, but what about like we think about okay, the parents are in denial. They now that we've gotten them out of denial, we've made them realize that there is a problem. It needs to be addressed, but the child in their eyes haven't hit that rock bottom yet. So is there a chance of saving that child, making that child wake up, or do they really have to hit rock bottom before they actually stop the negative behavior and actually change their lifestyle for the better?
So it's not about the loved one hitting rock bottom. It's about the family hitting rock bottom. Because
Gotcha.
let's how many times have we heard stories about somebody had an overdose?
Mhm.
They had an overdose. They don't know, right? They just repeatedly have. In Florida, we had a problem where people would overdose. They get taken to the emergency room.
Mhm.
They'd be revived. They'd walk out of the emergency room and get high again in the parking lot and have an overdose, right? So an overdose, which is, I mean, that's, I don't know what, the only other thing worse than that is death. And of course, there's no coming back from that. So the overdose, you know, the idea of that being rock bottom doesn't necessarily change behavior as a general rule. So
Yes.
it's about the family. Like how much more suffering do you want?
Yeah.
An old mentor of mine used to say to me, when people have suffered enough, they'll make the decision, they'll make the commitment. And I hate to
Right.
be blunt, but one of the things I've refused to do for the last 10 years is sugarcoat this stuff and tell you we're going to sing kumbaya and everything's going to be fine. No,
Yeah.
things are not going to be fine because the consequences of doing nothing can be severe,
Yes.
very severe. And so, because your loved one's brain has been hijacked, they're never going to hit rock bottom enough to come to the conclusion they need to change. Are there
Right.
people that get better without going to without being mandated to treatment? Yeah, of course it happens. But the families we work with are dealing with somebody who cannot make the decision to save themselves.
Right.
So, at what point is the family sick and tired of being sick and tired to the
Mhm.
point where they're willing to call us and say, "Hey, we understand there's a different pathway here, and you can get us down it." So that we can end the chaos and the nightmare. And when the family, I mean the decision makers, the mother and the father, right? Irrespective of whether the parents are still married, when the parents are on the same page and ready to make the commitment, that's when change happens. But
Mhm.
until they've had enough of having enough, then nothing's going to change.
Right.
It's the true definition of insanity. And I hate to say it, Stacey, but some families call us, every 3 months, every year. And they, for whatever reason, and I've got some good friends that are clinicians and they've been trying to teach me about the psychological component of this. They just cannot make the decision to save their loved ones.
Right.
I can't make the decision for you. I'm
Yeah.
the catalyst. Once you make that decision, now I can get you on that path to change. I can get your
Right.
loved one on the path to recovery. But until you are willing to accept the fact that you can't change this on your own and you're going to have to make a different type of commitment, then it's going to continue.
Yeah.
And for some folks, they never come to that conclusion. One of the things we do, Stacey, is we try to stay in touch with people. I send out a weekly newsletter to about 14,000 people,
Yeah.
and my staff try to touch base with families. And I can't tell you how many families we've called 3 months, 6 months, a year after they first called us.
Yeah.
And you know what we find out? The person died. They just, for whatever reason, they couldn't make the decision,
Yeah.
despite the history.
Right.
They just can't make the decision. And I'm not a clinician, so I'm not going to try and psychoanalyze anybody. And I'm
Yeah.
certainly not here to play the blame game.
Right.
But maybe the family never hit rock bottom.
Right.
Can't help you.
Tell everybody about your services and the things that you provide to help families.
Yeah. So the mission of the firm is to save families whose loved ones are suffering from substance use, mental health disorders, and failed attempts at recovery. And there really are three components to what we do. Number one is obviously the legal. We're a law firm, so we're selling legal services. And there are three basic statutes that we operate under here in Florida, depending on the case, how much control you need. I mean, it's not unusual for us to be operating under all three of the statutes that we normally focus on at the same
Yeah,
time. And of course, people get arrested in the middle of these things. And so I don't take criminal cases anymore, but as a former prosecutor and defense lawyer, I understand how the criminal system and our system, how it all interacts. And
yeah,
so the legal component is obviously that's the catalyst, that's the engine. That's what gives you the ability to make the commitment and honor that commitment. So
right,
the first component is legal. The second component is what I call clinical. 'Cause no point in having this court order in your hand if you don't have a treatment provider lined up.
right.
So sometimes families get referred to us by, maybe they're working with a treatment provider or they're a clinician or interventionist, and they've got the treatment component lined up. Great. If they don't, I have two clinicians that are part of our team. They are an a la carte option. They're not employees of mine, but they are our go-to. One's a licensed clinical social worker. The other's a forensic psychologist. And families, if they want, can consult with those folks. They can hire them to put together the clinical plan that's going to be necessary to get their loved one into recovery and keep them there. So number two is clinical. Number three is what I call law enforcement. So I have a private investigator on staff, and he has a team of investigators. Because in addition to the fact sometimes we have to serve people in different parts of the state, and we do operate statewide, sometimes people go missing. They walk out of treatment. They can't be found. Well, I'm a big fan of the men and women in law enforcement, but sometimes they don't have the bandwidth to do what I need to do as quickly as I
Yeah,
need it done. So I've got my
right.
whole sort of internal police force, and they do it for us. And that's important. And we found that those three things together on most cases really get the job done.
I love that. Now, one more time, tell everybody your website address to make sure they remember.
Thank you, Stacey. It's mental health addiction law firm.com. Mental health addiction law firm.com. Worst case, just Google me. I think I'm on page one or two of Google for most of the stuff that we do. So you should be able to find me. And if worst case scenario, Stacey, they can always bug you.
Yes, they could definitely bug me. Send me an email, go on my
Email
website.
Stacey.
Yeah, I'm everywhere.
It's not too early. She's not an early riser like her husband.
No, not at all. So, the listeners out there, I just want you to know that mental health isn't something to ignore and it's not something to wait on. The sooner you recognize what's happening, the more control you have over what comes next. And if this episode resonated with you, make sure you follow, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And Mark, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I love when you come on. I love your dedication to helping others. And addiction is such a prevalent disease in the United States and all over the world. And it really affects everybody. And it has killed a lot of people. It has brought people to suicide. It has brought people to many different types of mental illnesses. And I'm so glad you're out there doing what you do and sharing all your wealth of knowledge and being able to have a facility and a law firm like yours who's able to help individuals and help families get the help they need so they can bring their child back to a level where they could have a healthy, happy, and productive life. So I thank you so much for being on the
Thank
show
you,
and
Stacey.
I see you soon.
See you soon.